So we're going to be deep diving into the ICO landscape. We've only got about 15 minutes, so I want to open up the panel and go ahead and jump in. But the ICO being a multi-billion-dollar industry, it's rapidly changing and growing, and there's lots of unclear laws. Everybody wants to launch a token, and nobody quite knows exactly how to do it or what the right protocol is to follow. But one of the questions that I wanted to pose to the panel, because everybody here has such varying backgrounds, and I'm sure very different perspectives on the space, is what is the role of exchanges, and how do you envision them playing out in 2018, seeing as they're the gatekeepers of these ICOs? They would be very easy to shut down, and therefore no more people would not be able to buy tokens on the exchanges anymore. So how do you, or at least in the United States, so I'm curious to hear your thoughts on the exchange topic. Can go ahead and start with you, Rob.
Yeah, I think what we're probably going to see right now, if you think about the life cycle of an ICO, you go through the funding process, then eventually at the end of that life cycle, you're listed on an exchange. We're going to see a lot of exchanges kind of jump to the front part of that life cycle and really kind of handle a lot of the funding. So right now, every single ICO that you're contributing to has a different smart contract, a different process. You either have to register or don't have to register. I think what we're ultimately going to see is kind of a standardization of that process from exchanges and other service providers, where I could go to an exchange. I think Ethfinex and maybe EOSFinex were working on this as well, where I could click a button and pre-commit ahead of time. I don't have to worry about being on a whitelist or registering. And I can kind of guarantee my spot in that ICO up front, and then the exchange will pool all of those funds for me, and then also give me liquidity on the back end as well.
So that would make them the primary market, and not just the secondary market for exchanges.
Potentially, yeah. I think it'll be a big part of pooling those funds at the beginning.
I have a feeling there's going to be a lot of lawyers involved in determining that. As challenging as it is with secondary markets, primary market is something very different. But I do agree. I think that might be one of the pathways in the future. Exchanges have been critical to the adoption of cryptocurrency so far. So I'm not going to talk about the regulatory landscape and kind of what the future looks like there. But let's talk about how valuable exchanges have been to date. So right now, if you go on your iOS App Store, Coinbase is one of the almost always trending apps. You can go and download the Coinbase app, and Coinbase makes it really easy for you to make a more or less market order and buy Bitcoin, Ether, and a few other different cryptocurrencies. That has been the gateway for so many people into cryptocurrencies, tokens, blockchain, and it's been a remarkable thing. There are other exchanges out there, and GDAX, which is essentially was the underpinning tech that powers Coinbase's market order system. These other different order book exchanges that exist, Bittrex, Bitfinex, and the like, Kraken right here in San Francisco. These guys have done a remarkable job of creating something really extraordinary and professional and being able to handle additional challenges all the time. It started as something very small. No major exchange would possibly go and list these tokens. They didn't have the apparatus or the knowledge to do so. And these exchanges, they went and innovated. And they did something truly remarkable and gave people the ability to buy and sell these coins, which, among other things, let people understand the power of blockchain. I don't know what's going to happen in the future, but I can tell you that these exchanges are powered by some of the smartest people I've ever met, the most hardworking people. They spend an inordinate amount of energy trying to remain compliant, trying to make sure that their customers can be serviced properly. I'm sure many of you have been frustrated with exchanges before because you've been online basically for a very long time waiting for someone to respond to your ticket. I promise you they're all trying to fix that as fast as they can, but the demand has far outstripped so far the supply of talent even for that. Again, good things are coming. They've got lawyers. They're hiring some of the best ones, like people here. And I'm sure they want to work with regulators to make sure that they can continue to be good stewards and to help the community.
So going back again to the SEC, they want to regulate this market. They want exchanges to be accountable for, somebody can call them and complain about how their order was done. I started out the SEC many decades ago, and at that point in time, the CFTC, the way they had an order trail, they used to wad up their order, throw it on the floor, and at the end of the day, they would be swept up, and somebody would sit there and, and it took a long time for them to actually develop order trails. The SEC, right now, the technology doesn't seem to be quite there for security tokens. You have to have a transfer agent kind of intermediate there. And I don't know if any of you guys have ever traded in securities, but it takes like 3 days for the transfer agent to ever kind of process anything. You bring that into the crypto space, and you've pretty much destroyed tokens, in my view. So people are out there, as you say, trying to do the right thing. And the SEC is just learning. It's going to take time, once again, before any of this gets done. I know Rob said Reg A+, which is, again, a regulated way to do a public token sale. There are, to our knowledge, 20 Reg A+ offerings at the SEC right now, and the SEC just keeps asking for extensions. Not one token sale has been approved by them, and in part, it's because of the exchange issue. So we have a long way to go, and again, it's a long way to educating the SEC, and the more you reach out to the SEC and talk to them too, I think the better. Try to get a meeting. They are encouraging people to talk to them about how this whole process can be improved.
Yeah, something to jump in. I think an important point to clarify is that we're talking about centralized exchanges, and I think where a lot of your pain points are going to come over the next year, 2 years, 3 years, or with decentralized exchanges. Right. So right now with a centralized exchange, you have somebody where you can call, you can say, hey, delist this, but when you put that on a decentralized exchange that nobody controls, it's going to be interesting to see what control, if any, the SEC and other bodies have over those listings.
Fair point.
So what I would add to this is just last week, the SEC delivered a public statement cautioning investors to ask certain questions before they actually trade on any given cryptocurrency exchange. And this public statement also included some advice to some of the current operators of the exchanges. These questions that the SEC was asking, these are not just some philosophical, oh, why, you should ask this question. They already know the answers to these questions. And the questions point to a lack of transparency and a lack of regulatory infrastructure. All of these exchanges have the look and feel of a traditional securities exchange. They're supposed to have that look and feel because they want their customers to feel comfortable trading in cryptocurrencies and tokens in the same way that they feel comfortable trading on NASDAQ or NYSE. Except when you're trading on NASDAQ or NYSE, you're dealing with a huge regulatory infrastructure that the sponsors of these exchanges have to comply with. And not just the exchanges, but the institutions that are actually interacting with these exchanges. In the world of cryptocurrencies and ICOs on these exchanges, it is completely unclear how each exchange operates. Each one operates according to its own rules. There are no standards that apply across the board for these exchanges. And this is a serious problem. Now, this industry can actually evolve significantly once we have a regulatory framework for how these exchanges operate, but we're not there yet. And what I can say, there are significant sell-side institutions that are interested in this space, but they will not engage in it on behalf of their customers in terms of promoting and sponsoring retail products for investors because they don't believe that any of these exchanges currently operate as effective venues for price discovery. If you're going to have a retail product that actually has to cut an NAV every single day, they're not going to rely on an exchange for which they have no idea that these exchanges have systems in place to make sure that they're matching their buy and sell orders and that they're also trading their customers fairly. And given a lot of public news that's been out in the marketplace about allegations of market manipulation, problems with some exchanges operating vertically integrated wallets that are subject to cybersecurity attacks, there are a lot of problems there. So I am hopeful that we're going to get an infrastructure in place, and the way this infrastructure might become imposed is simply through a finding that certain primary cryptocurrencies are actually securities, in which case the whole regulatory infrastructure that already applies to exchanges such as the New York Stock Exchange and the NASDAQ, that's going to be the expectation that's going to be applied to the existing crypto exchanges.
Yeah, I think it's hard to overstate the importance of exchanges in this market. If you are launching a project and you can't get your token listed, that can spell the death of the ecosystem that you're trying to build. And I speak to many, many entrepreneurs every day, and one of the biggest problems they face is getting liquidity for their token. And so, you find there's this huge influx of tokens hitting the market, and it's only increasing, and centralized exchanges just can't keep up with it, nor do they really want to. In fact, in many cases, they're actively delisting tokens because they're worried about the regulatory implications of listing them. And so that's where I completely agree with Rob in that there's a very interesting emergence of the concept of a decentralized exchange that are becoming not only more popular, but they're becoming an increasingly important piece of this ecosystem. And the interesting thing about a decentralized exchange is not just that it's inherently decentralized, so you can't just go and shut it down, but it's also non-custodial. So that means the exchange itself does not actually touch any of these assets, and the users that are exchanging assets on the exchange keep their own private keys. So the security profile is much better there. From a regulatory perspective, it actually helps the story because everything is transparent. Nothing is behind closed doors in a centralized way such as it is today. In a decentralized exchange, everything is on-chain. It's just a much more transparent system that I think, in my view, is the future. And Stellar is an example of a decentralized exchange, and many people that are looking around and seeing, how can I fuel this ecosystem that I'm building, see this as an attractive way to gain liquidity for their tokens in a way that, in my view, will be looked favorably on by the regulators.
Yeah, so coming back from my Asia tour, I was able to sit down just with a few international exchanges, and it's very clear that we'll see kind of an open floodgate of exchanges overseas versus the ones in the States, i.e. Coinbase. And it's interesting enough, for instance, if you take Binance, right, which is a very kind of quick to market unicorn, if you will, this past year, the backlog, right, is almost near close to 4,000 tokens. Having said that, the main function for a centralized exchange, especially, right, is to provide liquidity to some of these companies that have ICO'd. But it's become very much of a rubbing elbows type of game. And what I've heard and what I've seen is essentially a lot of these international exchanges, they're taking payment to kind of skip the line. So outside of, I agree with Rob, there needs to be a legal framework that needs to be provided so that these exchanges have something to follow and there's not so much gray zone. But in addition, there's got to be a way around this kind of mafioso mentality, and I think that needs to be standardized and that needs to be cleaned up as well. But having said that, I think in terms of 2018, I see a ton of consolidation. I see a lot of exchanges actually being shut down as well. So, I'm curious to see how 2018 unfolds, but for the most part, just see a lot of consolidation, especially as it relates to overseas, and time will tell. That's really the only kind of determinant factor.
Yeah, on that note, with regard to consolidation, those of us who have been in the space for a while may recall 2015.
Right.
So if you remember Bitcoin in the early days, there were very few exchanges that popped up, and in 2012, 2013, there started to be some, and VC money started pouring into the space in 2013, but really 2014. So if you remember, Bitcoin price spiked to from 12 to 1,200 bucks by the end of 2013, and suddenly venture capital firms were interested, so they started putting money in, and they were putting money in exchanges. And some of these exchanges were getting Series A funding, others just seed funding, very few past that, as it turns out. And what happened was Bitcoin's price dropped, and Bitcoin, the technology, wasn't really consumer ready. You couldn't make Bitcoin transactions fast enough to buy a cup of coffee. So what happened was many of these projects funded by VCs kind of died. And you saw in the end of 2014 through the beginning of 2016, a lot of consolidation of existing exchanges. So there were all these exchanges that had popped up that were competing to do the exact same thing, and it was really a commoditization of exchanges. And some of the bigger ones, the ones that survived, started taking them off and pulling their customers, their technology, and other things around that. So this would be kind of the second time that happens. It wouldn't shock me, and I think we're starting to see that already with the Circle acquisition of Poloniex.
Right.
Great. We've only got about 52 seconds left, so I don't really have time to ask another question. But one thing that Rob and I were talking about beforehand coming out here is is the ICO space going to slow down once these regulations start happening? And one thing that was interesting that he said is like, actually he's seeing more and more money getting pumped into the ICOs since he sees everyone that pretty much is being launched come across his desk. So
yeah, and I think ICOs in general are not going anywhere. This method of funding is too instrumental and too innovative to really go anywhere. What's going to happen is that if the regulators don't get their act together, with the SEC and the CFTC both calling these things different things, the IRS thinking that cryptos are property, all this stuff is just going to continue to move offshore, and the US is going to miss out on this awesome opportunity. So hopefully they get it together, and we can keep some of that over here in America as well.
Yeah, and I second that. Personal experience, again, sitting down with some of the most powerful syndicates overseas, especially having toured through Japan, Korea, Hong Kong, and then ultimately Singapore, it was very clear in terms of the largest syndicates there that basically everyone's actually domiciling in Singapore. Binance came out of Shanghai, for instance. There's a ton of high-quality ICOs, probably even, no offense, but higher quality in Silicon Valley that are coming out of Korea, for instance, especially as it relates to ICO and some of the other platforms that are existing. Nevertheless, they're all shifting over to Singapore. Right now, Japan, for instance, has almost close to a 55% capital gains tax, stifling activity. Korea itself right now is kind of in in limbo, especially as it relates to the exchanges. And then Hong Kong, there's a ton of innovation, but a lot of the entrepreneurs and a lot of ICO companies there, they're scared, right? Because technically it's a part of China, and it's very authoritative. So Singapore is, I would say, kind of now the new homeland. And if the US, especially the SEC, doesn't get their act together, you're going to see a lot of the prized innovation heading overseas, especially to Asia, in my opinion.
really interesting. Wow, well, it sounds like there's a lot going on in the ICO space, and
Yep.
we are out of time, but the panelists, I think, will be around most of the day, so feel free to ask me questions if you see them out there. Great. Thanks very much.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.